It was Easter weekend 2015. London was quiet. Most of the city was at home, eating chocolate eggs, unaware that beneath their feet, history was being made. On a narrow street called Hatton Garden, the heart of London's Diamond District, a group of men were about to attempt something that had never been done before. But what makes this story different from every other heist movie you've ever seen? The masterminds behind this operation weren't young, agile cat burglars. They were grandfathers, pensioners, men who used walking sticks and wore orthopedic shoes, and yet by the time they were finished, they would walk away with loot valued at up to £200 million, making it the largest burglary in English legal history. This is the story of the Hatton Garden safe deposit heist, and how a grandpa almost pulled off the perfect crime. To understand how this happened, we need to meet the old boys. At the top of the hierarchy was Brian Reeder, a 76-year-old career criminal. He was the silent strategist, the man who knew the Diamond District better than anyone. Then there was John Kenny Collins, 75, and Terry Perkins, 67, hardened veterans who had spent decades pulling off small-time robberies. But the most crucial member was Daniel Jones. At 60, he was the youngster of the group. Jones was the driller. While the others had the experience, Jones had a very specific skill set. He knew the industrial drills, the diamond tip bits, and the hydraulics needed to punch through solid reinforced concrete. On paper, this crew looked like a retirement club meeting, but in reality, they were a precision instrument, forged over decades of criminal history. They had a plan, and they had a target. The target was the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Company. Unlike a bank, this facility was a fortress specifically designed for diamonds, gold, and jewels. It sat in a basement with a massive vault door. To get to that door, you had to pass through a heavy metal security gate, descend a narrow elevator shaft, and bypass a state-of-the-art alarm system. For 2 years, Brian Reeder and his crew had been watching. They knew the routines of the security guards. They knew that over Easter weekend the building would be empty for 4 days. They knew that the alarm system relied on landlines, old technology. The plan was simple, yet audacious. They would disable the lift, descend through the elevator shaft into the basement, and drill through 2 feet of reinforced concrete to reach the vault. But from the very first night, nothing went according to plan. On Friday, April 3rd, they struck. They disabled the lift and climbed down the shaft. But when Daniel Jones fired up his industrial drill, disaster struck. The drill was powerful, but it was also loud, and despite their planning, they hit a layer of concrete that was denser than anything they had anticipated. Sparks flew, the drill bit overheated, it jammed, snapped, and broke. The men stood in the darkness, covered in dust, defeated. For 6 hours, they tried to fix it. Eventually, they gave up. They left the building, assuming their retirement dreams were over, but Brian Reeder refused to quit. While the rest of London was having Easter lunch, he was on the phone. He called a tool supplier. On Easter Sunday, while the police were patrolling empty streets, Reeder walked into a hardware store, paid in cash, and bought a new, heavier-duty drill. That night, the grandfathers returned to the scene. They weren't worried about the police. They knew the building was empty. Their only enemy now was time and concrete. This time, the drill held. Hour after hour, they bored through the concrete. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the bit punched through. They had created a hole roughly the size of a small television, but there was a problem. The hole was 18 inches above the floor. They couldn't just crawl through. So they did something that seems almost absurd. They sent the youngest of the group, the 60-year-old driller, through the hole. He squeezed his body through the gap, falling headfirst into the vault. But once inside, he realized the scale of what they had found. Row after row of secure boxes. Using power tools and crowbars, they began to rip the boxes open. They didn't care about documents or sentimental items. They were looking for one thing: weight, gold, cash, diamonds. They stuffed duffel bags until they were bursting at the seams. In total, they emptied 73 safe deposit boxes. They walked out with loot valued at the time at around £14 million. But investigators later estimated the true value, given the uninsured gems and gold bars, was closer to 200 million. They thought they had gotten away with it. For 3 days they did, but the criminals made one fatal mistake. They forgot that modern criminals are caught not by fingerprints, but by data. One of the men brought his mobile phone to the scene. Police traced the phone signal back to the tower near the building. More importantly, investigators found DNA on a discarded water bottle and a cigarette left behind. Over the next few months, police watched these grandfathers living in a fantasy. They watched one of them try to melt down gold bars in his bathtub. They saw them spending cash on luxury cars. It wasn't a difficult arrest. When the police raided their homes, they found the elderly men asleep in their slippers. At their trial, the judge looked at these men, some in wheelchairs, most in their late 60s and 70s, and called them old lags who had tried to be professional criminals. But despite their age, the damage was done. Brian Reeder was sentenced to 6 years and 3 months. Daniel Jones, the driller, got 7 years. Terry Perkins died in prison just 3 years later, still clinging to the secrets of where some of the gold was buried. The Hatton Garden heist is legendary not because of the violence, there was none. It's legendary because it was a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous criminals aren't the young hotheads with guns. Sometimes they're the quiet old men at the end of the street biding their time. To this day, over 100 million pounds worth of that loot has never been recovered. It's out there somewhere, waiting. And somewhere out there, perhaps a grandfather is enjoying a very, very comfortable retirement. Thanks for watching. If you want to hear about the missing gold or the inside story of the informant who almost betrayed them, let me know in the comments below.